Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be talking on how to use smartphones and how to basically program open source smartphones. I had taken a course last semester in CS, and that's when I got the opportunity to work with a phone. I'll be passing around this OpenMoko phone so that you guys can just see and have a look at the phone. Yeah, it's on. No, you can turn it on. So, my talk is going to be really short. I'm just going to give an introduction about the phone, its architecture, and I'll tell you how can you develop some code or some application on the phone. I'll walk you through an example code, and we can see how it runs, and then we can talk about how each of us can use it in our individual research, and then we can see a demo if time permits. So open source smartphones are in the news about lately. The Google Android is very famous. So what the Android is basically is Google's platform for mobile devices. Most of these open source codes these days are running on Linux. Intel and Nokia also have got their own OS, which is called OpenMoko, and the other one is the OpenMoko, which I'll be talking about. So what exactly is the OpenMoko phone? The OpenMoko project is basically divided into two sub-projects. It's called the OpenMoko hardware and the OpenMoko software. The OpenMoko hardware is the piece of phone that I've been passing around. It's a Neo Freerunner phone, and the software is basically built on the Linux kernel. It has its own software stack, and it's basically the hardware is open source, so that you don't have to use the OpenMoko OS on it. You can write your own operating system, and it's basically open source, so you can build whatever you want on it. It has a lot of cool features. It has Wi-Fi, GPS, GPRS, Bluetooth, so you can use all these interfaces and build your own applications. When they say open source, they're very keen about it. So the hardware is completely open source. You can get the specifications for almost all the chips that are used in the phone. As you know, Linux and the software is anyway open source. So the hardware. One important thing is it uses an ARM processor. We all, I think, are used to programming on x86 processors. So this could be a little different. It has a comparatively small memory as probably what we use on Orbit or any other computers, but it's 4. It has a touch screen. You can use it with either a stylus or your fingers. It has an ASRoS card, it has a GPS, it has a GSM, it has 2 accelerometer devices in it. We can see how we'll use all of these ahead. It has a GSM. It's actually a phone, so you're supposed to use it for making phone calls, but right now the system is not stable enough that you can actually use it to call people. But probably it will get better. It's not stable, so it's not like you have to access into the terminal to make a phone call, but the voice clarity, and it takes time to generate a connection. The software, as I mentioned, it's based on Linux 2.6.24. You can program on any language you want. The GUI they use is either Utopia, and they use GTK to build the X11 platform. As we all must be used to using apt-get or dpkg for installing our local Linux machines, this phone uses opkg. It's a different installer, and I'll show you an example later. Okay, so getting started. So I'm going to walk you through an example so that we can eventually write a code on the phone. So there are 3 ways of working on the phone. One is the phone has a terminal on itself. You might not want to use that because it's too small. So you can use your laptop. You can SSH using the USB. So if you connect your laptop USB to the phone, you use the first 2 commands and you can directly log in. Can I? So you can eventually log in using the USB. If you're trying to connect it over wireless, um, this particular file that I mentioned, you have to go and add your say you're in WinLab, so you go and give the details of your WinLab network, and you can sorry. How did I get this IP? I just turn on my ETH0 and it is directly connected to, it's connected to WinMain, and that's how I can just log into the phone.
So wait, is this going through WinMain, this connection?
Yes.
So it's a Wi-Fi connection?
It's a Wi-Fi connection.
Oh.
So I just
Alright.
add WinMain to the file, and as soon as I turn on my Wi-Fi port on this, I can directly SSH into the phone. So when I say IP is the address of ETH0, it's my local IP that I get. So say I want to start installing or writing some code on it. Instead of doing an apt-get, we do an OPKG update, and it's very simple to. You just go and you download the particular conf file, and you can download any package you want. So people who want to write code in C, this is a little different than what we've written before. You cannot use GCC directly because it's an ARM processor. You cannot compile on the phone. You have to compile on your local machine. You have to cross-compile. So basically, you have to download the ARM toolchain on your local machine and compile it, and then copy the executable on the phone. You cannot compile a C code on the phone directly.
Why is that?
Sorry?
Why not? It's running Linux, right? Why doesn't it have a GCC installed on the phone?
GCC is fighting for an x86 architecture. So because this is ARM.
Nah, we used to use GCC like on Sun Spark stations back in the early 90s.
That GCC must be for Mac processor.
Yeah, sure. But why is it not a GCC on the phone?
So this is
Is it
the.
too slow?
Phone doesn't provide GCC.
Yeah, it might be the size or
I'm just saying, there's no, that's
it didn't have much memory.
more memory. Well, of course, my Spark station back then, I think like 40 megabytes is pretty awesome.
But
All right, I'm teasing you a little bit, but it's just, it must be it's just a lot faster to do your compiling off the
compile
phone.
manually,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're gonna cross compile on your laptop, and you're gonna
Yeah, so every
execute
time
it?
I write a code, I compile it on my laptop and then I have to copy it over to the phone.
Okay.
That's only for C. So if you're using Python or Java, you can directly work on the phone. I don't know why. So you can just go ahead and install Python by just saying OPKG install Python code.
Python doesn't compile, does it? Is it just interpreted?
Interface and devices, as we saw, it has a Wi-Fi interface. So the ETH0 is just the same. You use the same wife config and wconfig commands. Accelerometer, it has two sensors in the phone. Both of them are tilted at a 45-degree angle with each other, and we'll see the different applications that we can use with the accelerometer. You have a GPS and this is a simple Python code that I have written for the phone. It basically reads my accelerometer. As I mentioned that there are two accelerometers running. So right now I've positioned my phone this way, so it's like sleeping face up. Right now it's standing with portrait upright. I mean that's the portrait position. this is sleeping with face down. I have my landscape mode inverted. Basically I'm rotating this around the X, Y, and Z axis, and I've just calibrated. So as I mentioned that there are two accelerometers two sensors on the phone, and they return three values X, Y, and Z, if you can see. Based on these values of X, Y, and Z, I just calibrated to see which of them falls in which range, and I can decide the position of the phone. One interesting application that you can do is probably you can hook this up on your car, and you can see the acceleration in one direction. So you know if your car is speeding or
So
slowing
you
down.
can you do standing portrait, the opposite of upright? I'm sure inverted. I always wondered what that was called.
This is something not yet.
It's actually called downright.
So if you plug it in your car, you can detect acceleration. So when it says accelerometer, it means that it's in either of these.
Can you somehow trick it? Can you like move it very slowly and get it confused about its state?
There is one position which is not defined. It's like say 45 degrees. I just
Do you know what the resolution is for the accelerator? What can it measure? Please count.
I think it was 25 seconds. 25. I'm not sure. I just read it.
Do you think you could write an application that measured like how much you climb in vertical feet, like if you were climbing a hill?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So this is a code that
That
I.
would depend on whether it can measure a small acceleration.
So it
Yeah,
also
Probably
has a
great
GPS.
to get the scale.
Huh?
It also has a GPS, so you can combine both and.
So it's interesting, like the Garmin things that measure climbing, maybe it's off track. They use a barometer, right, to go along with a GPS to combine the two. And they don't use accelerometer for reasons they don't know why.
Can I change your reference points?
No. The reference quite I just.
So wait, can I ask a question? Like you were showing us on the screen here.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's just make sure we're clear. You were RSHing into the phone, and so that window was a Linux shell window running on the phone,
Yeah.
but displaying here.
Uh-huh.
Okay, good.
So either I can do it through USB or I can
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
even
I
code
see.
it in the phone.
Yeah.
But doesn't make sense. So these are the two sensors, and this is the orientation of both these sensors, and we really cannot change it.
So both of the
Calculate coordinate transformation. Right. Suppose, yeah, using GPS, you can take another point, and using this coordinate system, you can translate to that other coordinate system. You can do something else.
I'm sure you should be able to do that.
I guess you can write code
Yeah.
which takes data from the sensor and does a transfer if you want to do.
So, so I was talking about applications. So when it can measure the speed, it can find out whether you're going fast or slow. One is you can detect potholes on the road, so you can have sensor network kind of application. So if it has movement along this axis, then probably there was bumps or potholes on the road. The code that I just showed you is very simple. All I have to do is read this one input, and all I have to do is read this one input and then calibrate it based on the values of X, Y, and Z, as I said, and you know the position of the phone. How can we use this in WinLab? I find it particularly very similar to output nodes because I code a lot on output nodes. I think that we can use this for some mobility experiments, for routing experiments. Basically, in our project, we're working something on mobile routing. So we can actually, I can port my code on the phone and take it around and see how it works in mobile scenarios. I'm sure we can find a lot of localization applications. When I did it as a part of my coursework, we did a social networking application. I had calibrated, so this phone, it is actually calibrated to work on LAN. So every time I'm connected to some access point, I know where it is, and this information, every time I move from one building to from one floor in course to the other, it updates my Twitter page saying where I am. So you can use it to track someone if you want. You can add a lot of security features to it. So, okay.
So how much does this phone cost?
Right, it's for $380 or something, but they've closed the project.
Oh.
So it's no longer available. One application that Raunak had done was GPS. So since this phone has a GPS, so he was running an HTTP server on the phone and taking the GPS coordinates from the phone and feeding it to Google Maps. And if you go to this website, it will tell you where your phone is, so you can actually track someone using the phone. You can just go to the website and you know where the person is.
So your phone inside your GPS doesn't work now?
Yes. Yeah. And actually, if I go out, my Wi-Fi won't work.
So the web server that we were running was configured to run only locally. If you have a web server that hosts not locally, then you can have your phone feeding data into it, and you can always track it on a constant basis. If you have GPRS, then it will make it much easier to send data at a constant rate. Wi-Fi, it's based on your connectivity to that particular access point.
Yeah.
So basically, we didn't have a SIM card, but if we could use GPRS, then we can track the phone.
So what we did in this application was very simple, that we just read the particular GPS device and got the relevant sentence, the GPRMC sentence which we need, and translated that into logical latitude, longitude, and fed that to Google Maps and got a location back, which I was displaying on the page.
So you can create your own iPhone kind of apps. We had also created an application which was similar to Facebook. So you can just there's an icon on the phone which you click, and it asks you what are you doing, and it goes and publishes on a web page. And it's an HTTP server for that. So it's a Facebook kind of status update application. So these are the few things that you can
So
do.
has anyone written any like sort of social networking thing where it will tell you that your friends are nearby, like they're within 50 meters, like this friend or that friend? Like it could, right? If somehow you're all sending in your things, it could give you notifications for friends
It
and
can do
enemies
that.
that are close by.
You can say, you can detect what Bluetooth devices are around you, or you can just detect what phones are around you.
Yeah.
And then based on that, you can probably say.
But you can't detect what other phones are. It's just that those phones reveal where they are, right? That you can sort of interact with them.
That's being done by Google Latitude. It's a very similar thing that they're doing, whereas they have it only for BlackBerry as of now. So they have something on which if you go and click on it, I had a friend who was in India, and he just clicks on it, and I can see exactly where in India he is. So it's called Google Latitude. You can visit it.
So it also has this commercial application where you can find what are the nearest eateries and all this.
Yeah.
You can get money by advertising.
We thought of this like in what, 1992 We talked about this, like, oh, this would be great.
only 15 years later.
Many company are
What is the benefit of using that device over an iPhone or iPhone Touch?
It's open source, so you can write your own code and you can design, you can change whatever you want. You're not bound to use the apps that iPhone gives.
But somebody's writing iPhone apps, right? Could you become an iPhone app writer instead of, I mean, maybe that's his question.
they all have to iPhone apps all have to be approved by the App
Right.
Store.
So-
And you have to stick to
Yeah.
their SDK for iPhone apps. You have to stick to their SDK to develop the apps for iPhone. And here, this is completely open source. You can code in C or you can code in Python, or if you think you can install something else and you want to use it, it's as good as using a Linux. There's just some constraints. Like when we were trying to install Apache web server on it, you would think that it's working on a Linux phone, so it should work. I mean, it's working on a Linux system and it should work over here. But there's some complications. Then we moved to a Django web server that we wasn't working with Python 2.5, which is inbuilt on the phone. So we had to, drag modules individually and make it work. So there are a few drawbacks, but you can actually use it as a Linux-based system. So it's much easier to do whatever you want.
There's one thing about the phone I'd like to mention. If someone who's really wants to work on the phone has a problem with the battery. So the phone cannot boot if the battery is not charged, and the battery won't charge if the phone is not booted. So you cannot let the phone die. And if at all it does, you have to go and ask Deva for an external battery, or use a Nokia phone.
Can you get an external charger that can somehow charge it when it's removed from the?
Yes, so the phone, as long as it is plugged in and it's already booted, it can work without the battery. But for it to boot, it needs the battery. For the battery to charge, you need to boot it.
It has a 4.5 hour lifetime.
Is it a removable battery?
It is.
So when you get into the bad state, the battery's dead and the phone is off,
Right.
and you remove it and charge it.
You can.
Or I use someone else's phone, boot it up, and then charge.
And next year when the battery goes dead, the spare battery goes dead, and the phone's your stuff.
So this
Charge
phone,
the source first.
it has this battery terminal, also it can actually make a voice call, right? Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, it can make a voice call, but they say it's not stable and good enough.
The
Use as a
GPRS,
commercial
yeah.
phone.
So is that just a temporary kind of situation you feel?
But actually now that the project is closed,
There are other Linux phones also, like sort of supersede.
So there was a certain adaptation of this OpenMoko phone which was running the Android operating system, and that could do a lot more. So this one has the ON 2008 running on 2007 running on it, and we were working with the ON 2008, and then you can, since it's a Linux-based phone, you can also get the Android operating system, and it has different capabilities, so you can always try.
you can make your own operating system and work because the hardware is open source, so if you can develop the stack. Any further questions?
So are there any open source Linux phones that actually, like, you can go to somebody who runs GSM, or T-Mobile or somebody? And be,
HTC has developed some phones. So,
that you could actually go and use for real service and not just for fun?
so Google Android has come up with that, right? So
Yeah.
Well, okay, so G1, so first you're saying, can you go and somehow dig in and program your G1 in the same way as this? So there have been a lot of people who have written a lot of interesting programs that make the G1 a better platform than other things as a result?
I guess because it's supported by Google, I'm sure it's much more, it has a lot. Cool. These are the references you can use. Any further questions?
Are these going to be, the slides going to be available somewhere? Or can we find it? I don't know if they're, like, I don't know the website.
Yeah, we can put it up sometime.
So OpenMoko wiki page is like really helpful, and it covers everything, and you can just go through it and you should be able to do it. I had never programmed in Python before, so I just started with on the Python tutorial and went through it for like a couple of weeks, and I was able to, develop applications.
pretty.
If somebody really wants to write code, I'd suggest Python because I think it's very easy and compatible with the phone. So.
And the graphical user interface, I mean the GUI for the Python GTK is like really easy to use.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to do something with this phone or similar phones here, using
Ivan has a couple of phones, and I think even
Marco has a couple of them.
So do you know that what is this phone usable in Europe? Would it be? Like what carrier frequencies?
I think it doesn't work on energies.
You don't think so?
I think that's one. So they had a limited budget, so they made phones which the researchers could use everywhere.
And what was this class was in the CS department?
Yeah.
Did anybody else take this class?
I did.
So who's
Badrinath.
Audrey teaches this class?
So actually, the project was very interesting. We had to develop a web page for the phone, and it dynamically, if you log onto the web page, it would give you features about the phone. So one of the fields that I put in was accelerometer position. Ronak had done the GPS. You can use Wi-Fi. So we basically use Wi-Fi for localization. As I showed you the Twitter page. So what it basically did was it checked what access point you're connected in, and if you go to Skyhook, you can get the mapping of the access point to where you are. So we use that mapping to just translate it and show it on Twitter to show where exactly you are. So you can use
A similar application with that would be using the GPS instead of using the access point, and that would make more sense. But you would have to have an exhaustive your latitude, longitude, location to your actual physical location mapping.
Google Maps is that.
Google Maps can give that. One of the reasons I didn't do it was that it doesn't work indoors. Like indoors right here, I can't get a GPS fix, and it made more sense to do access point at that point of time. So, but yeah, it can always be done for.
you can write applications which will directly update your Facebook status with it saying you are in WINLAB, you are here, and you are at this GPS coordinate, give a link and show where you are.
So Sneha's done that for Twitter, and I've developed the GPS. It would be relatively simple to just combine the both to do that.
And there's a lot of code already available, especially like for social networking, for Facebook or Twitter. It's very easy. It's probably just a 15 or 20 line code to access Twitter and exchange your information. So if you guys want, I have the source code for the Twitter and Facebook applications. I can share. No.
Well, so you're going to be leaving us for the summer, right? So you have to get her quick if you want to talk to her. But let's thank our speaker. I want to encourage everyone to volunteer if you have anything you've been playing around with, any algorithms, toys, whatever. We'd love to hear about it. Suhas is the master of the webpage. That the whole idea is not to scare you and make you talk about your research. We get into that later. But for all of us to share ideas and stuff, okay? So again, thanks speaker and eat.